We qualified for food stamps when our first child was born.
Gil Richards says it in a very Gil Richards way. Gilbert, I don't care about networking. I create relationships.
What better person to be the best salesperson than the CEO? I logged about 3 million miles on Delta, traveling all over the world. People have three questions they want to know about their person that they're reporting to. Do you care about me? Are you committed to excellence? Can I trust you?
Welcome to the show. I'm Gil Welsford, third-generation Valve entrepreneur and founder of ValveMan.com. Join me as I hear stories, learn wisdom, and get industry inside insights. This is more than valves. It's business, legacy, and resilience. Let's get into it. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Gil Welsford. I'm here at the Valve Manufacturers Association talking with a very, very good friend who has literally known me since I was a baby. His name is Bruce Broxterman. He has been a great friend of our families, and we've been able to hang out together socially and work in business for a very, very long time. So I'm really, really excited to have Bruce on the show. Bruce, thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be here, Gilbert.
So I would love to just start out. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your career, sort of how you started. I know you spent a long time at Richards Industries, which we're going to get into. You spent a little bit of time away from Richards Industries, and then you came back and ended up buying the company. So let's just, if you could, just give us a little bit of story of your career.
Yeah. Just very fortunate to have landed where I did. I actually came out of college and started out as a high school English teacher and coach for a few years. And I think we qualified for food stamps when our first child was born. So I started looking for something else. And answered an ad in the newspaper for inside sales for Richards Industries, and started off on the sales desk in it's been so long ago. I think it was 1980, and learned the business really from the sales desk, interacting with customers like your grandfather and many others. And in the early 80s, the owner of the company, Gilbert Richards, came to me and said, we need someone that can start traveling overseas to try to develop our business internationally. And I jumped in on that and wound up logging about, I guess I logged about 3 million miles on Delta, traveling all over the world and visiting distribution, setting up distribution, seeing customers, doing training, all the things that a regional manager, kind of vice president of sales does for an industrial company. And that's what I did for many, many years, and eventually moved into an executive position with the company. In the early 90s, I left for about 7 years and went into a different industry altogether, into a kind of a senior management position. And in 2007, Gil Richards and I reconnected, and I came back to the company and served as the president of the company, running the operations for all of the divisions of the company at that time. And in 2009, we came to an agreement where myself and 3 other members of the management team bought the company, and we held the company until it's probably 2019-20 is when I finally sold the company and stayed on for a year. And then I moved on from the company, and I'm still involved on the board there. And I do some advising, but for the most part, now I'm out of the everyday operations of the Valve Works.
That's great. So 3 million miles. Do you get, I mean, I feel like I've only seen that in movies. Do you get like a certain like special awards for logging 3,000 miles on Delta?
They treated me pretty well for a while there, but now that I don't travel nearly as much, I don't get it as much attention. But yeah, they there was a chance that I was going to miss a flight, they had somebody in a golf cart take me across the runway and make sure I got to my flight. So wow. It was pretty special.
That's cool. That's cool. So the 7 years that you spent away from Richards Industries, it was Miami Systems, right?
That's right. Yeah, Miami Systems, which was a multi division local company in Cincinnati, Ohio. They were a manufacturer, but a different type of manufacturer, totally different industry. They were in the printing industry, and they had operations all up and down the East Coast. And what I did was I managed a region for them from a sales standpoint. But then after about a year, they put me in charge of a division in Vermont that did labels and plastic cards and sold those internationally, which is kind of why they looked at me, because there was a need for someone who understood the international side of the business. And I would commute to Vermont, leave on a Sunday night or a Monday morning, and come back on a Thursday. Probably I did that probably 3 weeks out of the month for, oh gosh, I think it was 3 or 4 years that I did that in the 2000s to kind of be involved with that division, which was a great experience. It really was it really kind of prepped me for being um, operationally being a leader in addition to being a sales leader. So from my standpoint, that was a great time in my career.
It's interesting because I've heard this concept that people come up with the best innovations when they have expertise in two completely random pieces of life. So, for instance, having expertise in printing and I'm assuming printing maybe like baseball cards or something like that, and then valves. Do you feel
Yeah.
like having those two experiences helped create any very unique innovations, or did that time at Miami Systems help? How did that prepare you to be the
Well,
president of Richards?
it's a great question because it does. I wouldn't say it's so much two different industries, although they were completely different industries. It was two different organizations that did things differently. At at Richards, we are very strongly involved with manufacturers, reps, and distribution, sales channel that is independent from the company. And at Miami Systems, it was a totally different structure. We had direct salespeople all over the all over the country. And so instead of interacting with independent reps, you were interacting with company employees and structuring compensation plans based on them being direct employees, incentive plans. Um, it was a totally different environment in terms of motivating and recognizing your sales team. And to me, that was an invaluable piece of the puzzle as I developed as a manager and an overseer of business operations. And I think, and also different cultures. You learn from that. The culture at that organization was totally different than the culture at Richards. And in the end, you come out of all of that as a blend of all of those experiences, I think, and that forms you as the manager that you become, or the leader that you become. I felt like I grew tremendously in the time that I spent away from the company at Richards. I would say this. I really, when I was at Richards, because of where I started in the company, I really understood the product. I knew how it was sold. I knew how it was applied. I knew what our customers wanted, the applications. I knew the value systems that they were looking for from the product, that what they were trying to get out of the product and out of us as a manufacturer. At Miami Systems, it was a little different experience. I never became that product expert. So I didn't focus so much on the product side of it. I relied on my sales team to do that. And I learned to step back and become just more of a director or kind of organizer of the effort and focus on the process rather than the product so much. And I think that made me a better overall leader for that. Again, because it was a different experience. I was used to jumping in and hands-on. Give me the details of your application, and I'll figure out what you need, which I've always done in the valve works. But in that printing side of the business, I didn't have that tribal knowledge. I didn't have that base of understanding of how, but my people did. So, I relied on them and leaned on them, and I focused on things that would help them be more effective in their work. And I think that made me a better leader.
That's really interesting because something that I have always thought of Bruce Broxterman when I think of Bruce in the valve world is you were an extremely technical CEO. You can size a Mark 60, you can size a Mark 80, like exactly, and you can, when you're doing a ride along, you can talk about the product, and it's because of I can only assume how you started in the business and grew a lot of your career in application support. Do you think that was helpful, or do you think that was a hindrance actually, because it almost like you got into the weeds too much sometimes as a president specifically?
I think from the standpoint of your question, I think a blend is helpful. I really do. I think having both of those experiences is helpful. You're right. You can get into the weeds too much. I really, as a CEO, had no business sizing a Mark 60, as you said. I couldn't help myself but do it. But that was not really the role that I had. I needed to step back from that part of the business and be able to look at things from a different level, a different viewpoint, further back. But that being said, that having that knowledge gave me incredible confidence in the business. When I was walking through the shop, I knew what kind of product they were working on in the assembly department. Or if somebody in the machine shop was machining a body, I knew that was a body for a 4-inch Mark 67 in carbon steel, and those things were just kind of instinctive. They just kind of happened in my head. I walked through a printing plant, and I could see what product was coming off the press, but how that press was working and where that product was going to wind up, I wasn't always really comfortable with. And as a result, I never had that full, total confidence in looking at the business from a leadership standpoint. I think the blend of the two has really kind of been a big plus in my career, and I think it's been invaluable to me as I've developed and grown.
It's something that I struggle with a lot because when we started ValveMan 15 years ago, I did the order processing, I did the sales calls, I did quotes, I did product uploads, I did blog content creation. I was when they say like chef, cook, and bottle washer or whatever, I was doing it all, right? And now that we've grown a sales team and we have a really amazing team, like we have a director of email marketing, we have director of organic SEO, director of pay-per-click. We have now it'll be four sales folks. We have a sales manager. It's comfortable for me to jump on the phone with the sales guys and just sell product. I love it. And it's so much fun. And because at the end of the day, we're not really selling, we're just helping customers and building relationships. And I love that. I think it's so much fun. But sometimes when we're doing sales trainings, I'll be like listening in on the calls or whatever. I just want to hop in because I find it so much fun. And I actually think that's a bit of a detriment to me that I'm so willing to get into the I'll call it the mud, that sometimes I don't look at things from a 10,000 foot level.
Yeah. And I think you do have to catch yourself. But at the same time, one of the things that I've learned, Gil Richards would speak to this at times with me, is that, what better person to be the best salesperson and the biggest sales effort in the company than the CEO? I mean, nothing happens until something is sold. And if there's one primary focus in a company, it's got to be selling the product. And if the CEO is not willing to jump in and do that on occasion, I think that is a kind of an indicator to the rest of the organization that, This, what we're churning out in the plant is really important, and that sales thing's just all kind of fluff. Well, if the bottom line is they're all important, they all
Sure.
have to happen effectively for you to be successful. But in the beginning, I always have stated and still feel very strongly that if somebody doesn't go out and sell something, nothing happens. And so we really have to be focused on that sales process and make sure it's successful. And then all the other things have to stay, fall in place as well. You can't be successful if you're not delivering product on time. You can't be successful if you're not collecting your bills. Your engineering team has to make good decisions and be able to design good products. Your marketing team has to be able to understand what's going on in the marketplace in terms of price and product and new product development and so on. All those things have to happen. But in the end, if somebody's not out selling it, the other stuff doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's a great point, and especially for a business like ours, we're in distribution. Like that is our business is sales and marketing. We're really a sales and marketing organization.
But the more you can do of those other things, I mean, you're not actually manufacturing product typically, but you may be assembling things, you may be consolidating things. But you do have to be effective in customer service. You have to be effective on the engineering side of it, application side of it. You have to be effective on the process side in terms of paying your bills, collecting your bills, and so on. So, you're in the same challenge as everybody else. And I think you're right. I think you're going to be judged in the end on how effective you are selling the product.
So that's why I have this mission in our business that I talk to our team about every day. And I talk about this, people hear it all the time, is our goal as a company is to create the best B2B customer experience in the world. And it starts, and I chat with our warehouse team about it. I chat with our order processing team about it. I chat with our sales team about it. Everybody throughout the entire organization knows our goal is to create the best B2B customer experience in the world. And I think you're right. It's a holistic. It's the spoke of the wheels. And if one spoke isn't firing on all cylinders, the wheel isn't going to move properly.
And your end product's not as good. It really isn't. You have a special today in today's marketplace and today's world of technology. You all have a much more difficult challenge in that I think that the relationship side of the business is critical, and you have that obstacle of sending emails and text messages and not having face-to-face conversations, or for that matter, even telephone conversations like we used to have in the day to help develop relationships. Because I always said to my regional sales managers, we want to be one of the top 3 product lines that each of those manufacturers' reps takes into the marketplace. And when you go in and spend time with a rep organization like the Welsford Company, you want to have a complete experience with them. You want to train them. You want to go out and make joint sales calls. You want to solve problems for them, look at applications. But you want to have dinner with them. You want to go to their kids' ball game. You want to have a relationship, much more so than just a business relationship, a connectivity, so that when you leave that territory, that salesperson is going to spend an inordinate amount of time on your product line, more than you may even deserve, because of that relationship that you've forged with them. And I always felt good about it because the relationships were genuine. It wasn't that I was just trying to woo somebody over so they would spend time on my product line. I enjoyed being with the people that I worked with, and I enjoyed having them as friends. So it was a total win-win, in my opinion, for all of us that were involved. We had these relationships that were personal, and connectivity was strong. But at the same time, we were having success from the standpoint of the business.
So it's so funny that you bring this up, because it reminds me of a piece of wisdom that I was given 15 years ago. And it's by a guy that you've mentioned a couple times, Gil Richards. No relation, by the way. Gil Welsford, Gil Richards. We just happen to both be in the valve industry. Side note, one time my dad, Gil Sr., myself, Gil Richards Sr., and Gil Richards III, his son, were all having dinner together, the four of us. And so there were four Gils sitting at the table, which was kind of funny. But okay, so about 15 years ago, after you had bought the business from Gil Richards, for those that don't know, Gil Richards was the founder of Richards Industries, and Bruce bought the company from him. He was a very, very good friend of my grandfather and my dad, and just an amazing guy that a lot of people in the valve industry look up to or did look up to. He's since passed. But I had the privilege of spending some time with him after he retired down in Florida. And I remember doing this ride along with him. We were driving to some restaurant. It was about an hour away from his home. And my dad and I were both visiting him and Mary for a few days. And Dad said to me, he said, "Gilbert, why don't you ride with Mr. Richards?" And I remember almost every part of that conversation so vividly, because I didn't have a lot of time with Gil Richards, but I had about this 1 hour ride along, and I remember just peppering him with questions. I was like 20 years old, and I'm just trying to like learn so much from this guy that I heard so much about. And I was asking him about going to business school, and because I believe he had gone to Harvard for his MBA, right?
Yes.
And I said, "Man, you must have gotten, the networking must have been amazing." And he says it in a very Gil Richards way. He goes, "Gilbert, I don't care about networking. I create relationships, and that's all that matters." And that was such when you're 20 years old, you're told network, like hand out your business card, blah, blah, blah. And it's true. Like I mean, I have stacks of business cards. I don't know who these people are. Like I talked to them 5 years ago. I'm never going to call them. But having that relationship, you and I, Bruce, when I was 16 years old, I remember going to Richards Industries and assembling valves. And afterwards, you took me out and we went to your grandson's soccer game. I still remember that.
Right.
It was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And those are the types of moments that create really long-term relationships. So yeah. I just appreciate that advice that he gave me. And I'm sure you were given similar advice.
Absolutely. That's where I learned that, all of these things were things that I gleaned from my frequent, many long trips and meetings with Gil, and very much learned my philosophy of business and business relationships from him, and a lot of conversations like what you had.
So to talk about the relationship with Gil Richards a little bit. So I'm sure he taught you work ethic and building a strong team and decision making and creating a good structure and that kind of stuff. But man, one thing that I remember of Gil Richards is, and this goes back to when he was still the owner of the business, work ethic, man. I mean, that guy just worked and worked and worked and worked. And I mean, there was a culture of coming in on Saturdays and working. Yeah. And he was so intense in his work. And I feel like today the work environment is just very different. It's much more like balanced. How do you feel like that his work ethic compared to, I'll call it the work ethic of the modern day businessman? What do you think about that difference of, the culture of, hey, everybody comes in on Saturdays and works half a day, to everybody, wants to leave at 4, have these flexible hours or whatever that may be?
It has evolved, and it was one of the more difficult struggles that I had as a leader, because I was the CEO of Richards when all of that kind of change began to unfold. And it was hard for me. I was a guy that came in, I worked, first 20 years of my career, I worked every Saturday. It was, besides the travel, when you were in town, that was a work day. And I learned that from Gil. And that was an expectation, not an option. And it has changed. And I think having the patience and the I guess the intelligence to deal with that effectively and make sure you understand that People do have personal lives, and they do have to have multifacets in their lives. They have to be able to not only be effective at the workplace, but be effective dads and husbands and wives and daughters. It does give you perspective. I did see a quote that I have growing grandsons. I have 19 grandkids, and some of them are starting to reach. One's a senior in college. The one whose soccer game you went to is now a senior in college, and some are getting ready to go off to college. And I sent them a quote that I saw the other day. It said, "If you never want to worry about the cost of something, don't worry about the number of hours that it takes to get the job done. Don't ever count hours if you don't want to have to count money." And Gil once said to me, "It's not about the money. It's what you can do with it. And if you are willing to work hard, the money will come and you don't have to be obsessed with it." And I would say that looking back, that's very true. You know, when you're young and trying to buy that first house and you have kids coming along and try to make sure you give them the life that you want, it's really hard not to look at the scoreboard in terms of dollars and cents. But as you get older, it's really about family and relationships. And what you hope you do is you work effectively enough so that you can focus on that and not have to be obsessed with making a living, you know, and paying the bills. The bills will be paid if you live the life that you need to live. That being said, you know, there's no replacement for work ethic and effort and being willing to make the sacrifices that it takes to be good.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good wisdom there, Bruce. Thank you. So I'm going to take the conversation a little bit different because you had given me some advice about when you're growing a business, which we're working on doing and taking on this third generation company and trying to grow it, just as you did at Richards. You said, set specific goals, review them regularly, measure progress, adjust, and adapt as necessary. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to double down on that a little bit. So first off, I guess, could you give me an example of maybe a way that you did that? And was it like a 10,000 foot level goal? Are you setting really small, I guess I normally call them benchmarks, like quarterly benchmarks? Mm-hmm. And then also, who do you decide is in the room and in the conversation when you're setting those goals, when you're reviewing them, when you're measuring the progress, when you're adjusting, and when you're adapting?
Yeah. But, you know, I always tried to set I had two sets of objectives. One was my own personal objectives from the standpoint of my career and my growth as an individual. But then more importantly, I had the set of objectives for the business. And we laid those out. Those were always in writing, and those were formed through face-to-face, whiteboard, blackboard, you know, brainstorming sessions with the management team. And that group it varied in size, anywhere from myself and the three other owners to then we would fold that out to the 6 to 8 other key managers in the company. And it was a process that I learned, early in my career. It's an old process. It was called management by objectives. And it was important that you set the goals for the business that were objectively measurable. And it really is where that advice that I gave you came from. Make sure that you set specific goals, that they are measurable, that you regularly look at them and understand how you're doing against your objective, and then change and adapt accordingly as you progress through the year. And we set those goals annually. We reviewed them monthly. Every time I sat down, I had a packet for each of my management team, I had a packet that was contained in a clear covered folder. And on the front of that packet was the 8 to 10 to 12 objectives that we had. And every time I sat down with them, that was on the table, and we talked about those objectives at some point in the conversation. And then what you need to try to do is you need to try to draw that individual member of your team into those objectives. What is the role they play? What is the impact that they can have on those objectives, and how is that coming? It's a grind of a process as you go through it. And you made a good point earlier, but at the same time, you've got to push that back and make sure you're not just looking at it from a day-to-day standpoint, but also from the overall health of the organization and where you're headed. Yeah, the sales goal for this year is really important, but what do we see 5 years from now in terms of the size of the company and the growth that we're going to achieve? It's got to be a combination of the two. Or somehow you have to bring the conversation in so that it covers not only that 6-month set of objectives, but also what is the long-term picture we have for the organization? Where are we going?
And would you publish those long-term objectives for, I'll call it public, like everyone to see?
Absolutely. For the team. And then we would have company-wide meetings on it kind of varied depending on what was happening with the business, but certainly quarterly, where we would bring all the people in from the shop, everybody from the inside sales group, the engineering team, everybody, really the entire organization, into our cafeteria. And we would sit down and say, okay, here's how we're doing. Let's talk about, we as a company have certain goals, and here's where we are against those goals. And so that everybody felt like they were a part of that process and knew how we were doing. The worst thing that you can do is set these goals and then stick them in a drawer somewhere for the year. And then at the end of the year, pull them out and say, how'd we do? It has to be something that has to be a living document, a living process that everybody is involved in and at least knows about. And then we try to kick it down, so that the folks on the shop floor, they had a set of objectives that fed into the overall company objectives. And you try to do that at every stop along the way. Every department has a set of their departmental goals that feed into what the overall company goals are. And, and I'll laugh when I say this. And meanwhile, you have to do all of that without making people feel like they're spending their entire day at a meeting talking about objectives rather than getting their work done, So it's a balance.
Sure. Well, it's actually, it's funny. This is a full circle conversation because it actually talks about how every single part of your organization is so important for the growth of the organization. So, it's not just the sales team. It's not just the assemblers. It's not just the warehousing team. It's everybody. But I think each person having goals that they know feed up to the overall company vision probably does help people understand that their job is really important.
It does two things. It helps them understand what their part is to play in this whole process that we're going through. Plus, it creates value. It makes them feel like they're a part of something bigger than, hey, I'm showing up and I'm running a machine for 8 hours, or I'm assembling valves for 8, or I'm answering the phone for so long, or processing emails, whatever it happens to be. We always talked about culture so much, and I really stole this from your mom will like this. I stole it from a Notre Dame football coach, and he always talked about the culture at Notre Dame football.
No, my mom went to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I know. And the conversation always went like this. People have 3 questions they want to know about the person that they're reporting to. Do you care about me? Are you committed to excellence? And can I trust you? Those are the 3 words, those 3 questions, but those questions are much broader than that. Do you care about me? Well, do you care about me as an individual and how I'm doing today? But do you care about where I am in my career process? Where do you care about me as far as whether I'm working in the right conditions in my position? Do you care that I've got the right training to do my job effectively? Do you care where my career is going? This is not my last stop. I have another 2 or 3 stops ahead of me. Are you thinking about those things for me? Can I trust you is obvious. Do you have integrity? Are we in this business just to make money, or do you have values that you're trying to follow? And do you have a commitment to being an honest company, giving your customers honest business? And then being committed to excellence. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to be around a winner. And if the coach If the CEO is not committed to excellence, doesn't want the very best, then why are we here? You know? So I think all of those three simple questions evolve into an entire kind of look back on the culture of the company and the nature of the leadership that's in place. So we always talk about those three questions a lot with all of our people and at every one of our meetings.
Wow. Thank you so much. That is amazing wisdom. I have like a page of notes from this conversation, and thankfully it'll be recorded so I can review it again. But I really, really appreciate this, Bruce. One takeaway that I got from this is I do we call it the State of the Union, and it's a meeting quarterly with our team. And I'm always sharing with them, what are the project wins that we had last quarter? What are we working on this quarter? And what's happening next quarter? Sort of like projects. But what I'm going to add into the State of the Union is our goals. And that's something that Jason, my brother, and I are working through right now, is our company goals. And as you said, it is a very arduous process. Like we're 5 meetings in and we're still like not necessarily there yet.
Yeah, it's
but I think having those like quarterly benchmarks is really important. So that's something that I'm going to include in my State of the Union. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, Bruce, I really appreciate your time. This has been such a valuable conversation. I hope everybody is taking a ton of notes, because Bruce Broxterman has had an extremely successful career in the valve industry, built an incredible, grew an incredible business. And it's something that is just, you should be super, super proud of. And Bruce, I just feel so blessed to be able to have you, be on our team and continue to be a friend and a mentor that we can look up to. So thank you for that.
Gil, you're very gracious, and thank you. I'm humbled by that set of compliments. I enjoyed the chance to kind of revisit some of these thoughts that aren't at the top of my mind anymore. But it's still very important to me, and I still value it incredibly. And I applaud you for taking the approach of focusing on these kinds of things. Not everybody, a lot of guys and women, a lot of them are just looking at the numbers and checking the financials to see how we're doing. But you're looking at it from a much broader standpoint and looking at bigger questions and bigger things that will help your business become successful. And I applaud you for that.
Well, thank you. We make decisions based off of growing our business for the 4th generation, which I think changes the decision-making criteria quite a bit. We're not like a private equity company, so we're not just trying to build our bottom line. We're really trying to, I say, build like a pyramid, because you can't knock a pyramid down instead of building a massive skyscraper. So, but all of this, Bruce, is really, really, really helpful. So thank you so much again. And next time we are in Cincinnati, I will be sure to treat you to a nice dinner.
Yeah, I enjoy being with you anyway.
Absolutely. All right, Bruce, have a great day. Thank you so much. Have a good one. All right, bye.
All the best.
Thanks for listening to Fully Open. If something stood out or sparked a thought, I would love to hear it. See you on the next one.